Should we be concerned that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company aren't really showing us anything about the new games? Let's dig into that, shall we? So this is a bit of a different video. As you can tell, I'm in a different setting. I am currently on vacation, so I don't have access to my full range of equipment, but I thought I'd at least try to get something done while I was here, so here we are. This is an attempt at a different style of content that's quite a bit different from what I normally do, where I usually script out every word and everything I want to say in advance. This video is a lot more loosely scripted. I have like a few points over here of things I want to talk about, but nothing super concrete. I'm just gonna kind of talk and we're gonna see how this goes. So where are we currently with the new Pokemon games? Both games, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl and Legends Arceus, were revealed back in like late-ish February. And at the time, they were revealed and we saw a little bit from them, but nothing super substantive. We didn't see any like gameplay demonstrations or whatnot. They were just some brief 2-minute trailers. So far so good. You know, early reveal, we're usually not shown all that particularly much. So, you know, we'd expect to see stuff later, but then the months have gone by and nothing happened. The big point of contention was that we saw nothing at E3. The game wasn't shown off at all. It wasn't part of the Direct or the Treehouse presentation. And there could be a number of reasons for that. One could possibly be that they just wanted to focus mostly on Metroid Dread, because that was definitely the hype moment, at least it was for me. I jumped out of my seat when that game came out. But another possibility is concerns that the games just aren't presentable yet, which I kind of doubt. I feel like at this point in development, it's probably mostly just polish and testing work. So I don't think that's necessarily the reason. One reason, however, might be, at least for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, that they were revamping the graphics. What we saw recently, though, was with the new OLED Switch model. The change isn't super noticeable, but there is definitely a change, at least in the lighting and shading engines, which is good, because that was like one of the things I saw with the games. It's like, that really needs to be fixed before launch. But beyond that, it's really unclear as to why they aren't showing anything. And for me, what that's causing is a bit of concern about some of the apprehensions that I've had about the games since they were revealed. For me, the biggest apprehension was that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were said to be faithful to the original games, which are perfectly fine games. They're Pokemon games. They're perfectly playable, but Diamond and Pearl are among some of the weaker entries in the franchise, and its expanded version, Platinum, improved the game quite a bit. Probably the biggest thing was the Platinum Dex expansion, which expanded the Pokedex from 151 to 210, which added a lot more options, including Fire-type options, because in Diamond and Pearl, you had 2 options. You either picked Chimchar, or you caught a Ponyta later on in the game. And currently there's like a few hints that there might be Platinum content in the game, but there's nothing super substantive, I might say. What we saw in the overview trailer is that the NPC lady in Floroma Town, who was added in Platinum, who gives you the Grace Adia, is there, and we also saw a Porygon Z in the battle trailer, which suggests that we might have the expanded Pokedex. However, I'm going to say that those aren't really definitive proof. They're just sort of points of note that people have speculated on, but I don't know 100% if that necessarily means anything. And I'd be inclined to say that it might not, but I'm still gonna be a little optimistic about that. My bigger concern, however, is HMs. HMs are by far the worst part of Sinnoh. Like, traversing the Sinnoh region is absolutely awful already. The swamp areas and the snow areas slow you down a lot, and there's concern about those areas as well for me. Are they gonna still be unbelievably hard to traverse like they were in the original games? Or are they going to fix it and make it more manageable? The thing with HMs, though, is that in Sun and Moon they were removed and they haven't made a comeback since. But if they're being faithful, like, are they gonna come back, or are we gonna have some type of replacement? Because these obstacles are kind of necessary. They're going to be used in order to make sure the player isn't getting into areas before they're supposed to. Something is going to have to be there. And I would just rather it not be HMs, but currently they haven't shown us anything, so I can't say for certain whether or not they're there. There are other things like, are we gonna have the Fairy type, and we're gonna have Gen 5 and up Pokemon and moves, and I'm presuming the answer to those questions is yes. I don't think we're going to regress mechanically speaking. At least I hope. I highly doubt it's gonna happen. But that's still something that some people have brought up, so I thought I'd at least address it, and I think the answer to that is probably going to be no. The other thing is, like, why are these games being so faithful in the first place. Part of this might be due to the fact that ORAS got, where people kind of complained about that game integrating Mega Evolution so heavily into the story and changing a bunch of things, but at the same time, why did they correct so much? This seems like a wild overcorrection. We don't have any redesigns for any of the characters. The overworld is exactly the same, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be adding anything super substantive. And so why is that? Why are they so hell-bent on making these games exactly like the original Diamond and Pearl? Because, as I've mentioned, the original Diamond and Pearl were good, but they weren't amazing, and there's a lot of ways that Gen 4 needs to be improved upon. Traversal speed, for instance, something I've already talked about. And beyond that, the last point of concern that I have is that we don't really have a lot to go off of in terms of what ILCA's capable of. This is a fairly unknown developer, and for me, it's a case of where I don't know what these guys have done before and what they're capable of, so I want to be able to see with my own eyes what they're doing just to make sure that these games are going to be okay. And I'm going to trust that they're probably good. Some of the games they had listed are pretty big budget titles, but the nature of their contribution isn't well known. So it leaves the question open as to what necessarily is going to happen here. And lastly, I'm going to move off of the Diamond and Pearl remakes because I've talked enough about them already, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Legends Arceus. So Legends Arceus is kind of what people have wanted for the series ever since 2017 when Breath of the Wild came out and kind of blew us all away. But it's a case for me where I'm concerned that the general concept of Breath of the Wild isn't going to mesh super well with Pokemon. So again, it's kind of a case of where I kind of want to just see it to be reassured that, okay, yes, this is actually a valid design concept and it's going to work and be an enjoyable game. Or alternatively, it might be like, no, I was right the whole time. This isn't going to work and I knew it wasn't going to work. And I told you so that it wasn't going to work. So I'm going to kind of explain kind of what my hangups are with Legends Arceus. Probably the big one is that open world games and RPGs are kind of a weird combination because Pokemon relies pretty heavily on there being a level curve in terms of its difficulty. And obviously the difficulty has gone down a lot, starting mostly with X and Y, but that's still something that's going to need to be a concern in these games, especially depending on how much it's going to port over concepts from the main series. If we're going to have all of the moves and stat system and turn-based combat, the game is going to have to do something to accommodate the open world design, especially because enemy Pokemon are going to have their learn set and evolutionary forms adjusted to match that. You're going to have to devise some form of level scaling or change the mechanics completely in order to make the game still have a reasonable difficulty curve. Another major thing is that I've never really been a huge fan of the open world concept. Like, I liked Breath of the Wild, but it's not my favorite 3D Zelda. I actually kind of thought the old formula worked, and stuff like Skyward Sword and Wind Waker and Twilight Princess were overall just more enjoyable games. Again, this isn't to necessarily say that Breath of the Wild is a bad game, because it's not, just that it's not necessarily my cup of tea. However, to my point here is that not everything needs to be these crazy, large, open world games. Linear, story-driven games still have a place in the industry, and I don't like this broad push away from them. Why are we so dead set on large open worlds? Because a lot of them don't capitulate well on this idea. We focus so much on the size of the world and less so on the amount of content in it. So what I'm concerned about is that in its drive to be this open world Pokemon game that we all wanted, Legends Arceus is going to be a bit barren, and there's just not going to be that much content in the world, and it's just going to be kind of bloated in its size. And I guess my last point with Legends Arceus is, like with Breath of the Wild, is this the future for the series? Are all games going to be like Legends Arceus going forward, or is this going to be a case of where that's going to kind of be its own little sub-series, and we're still going to get the mainline RPGs? Because I like the mainline Pokemon format. Like, I have issues with Sword and Shield. I have a lot of issues with Sword and Shield. But I like the core formula that they have going, and I don't want to lose that. I really, really don't. So, are we still gonna get more traditional Pokemon RPGs, or Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl going to be it? I just want answers here, guys. Is that so much to ask for? Okay, to kind of wrap this thing up, I just have concerns, and I just want answers. Like, when are we gonna see more information, guys? Like, I don't think waiting until launch to see what these games are like is going to necessarily be a good thing. And I think a lot of us fans just kind of want some answers. This isn't saying like with ORAS where they over-revealed everything and there weren't that many surprises. because that was an issue with ORAS, and I will be working on a video in the future where I will be talking about that a little bit, but currently we've had nothing. I want something, guys. Just give me something, okay? Alright, so that's basically everything I have to say. Like this video if you enjoyed it, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of this format, because I'm not 100% sure about it quite yet, so just give me some feedback here, guys. I want to know what you liked, what you didn't like. Should I make more of these, or should I just, go to my traditional scripting format where you'll get 1 or 2 videos a month? Or should I try this so we can get a little bit more content out the door between those? Again, just let me know what you guys want. You guys are my audience and I can't read minds, so the only way for me to know what you guys want is for you to tell me, okay? With love and peace, I will see you guys next time.